streaming. Okay. All right, 1, 2, 3, go.
I've never really understood why people do that, because you don't actually need to.
You know, it's more for audio cutoff and whatnot, I think is what that. So, today I'm doing something a little bit different. As soon as I joined the Savvy session here. Works.
Pretty sure you're in my session, because
Okay, I'm in your session. Never mind. So, I'm joined today by Savvy, the asshole from previous videos in GTA, as well as
Why am I suddenly an asshole? This is not
well,
right.
you know, you kind of are. So that's just how it goes, unfortunately. Today I wanted to just get to know him a little bit better. Who is he? What does he do? And how is he trying to better the world in some way? So, Savvy, who are you?
I'm a person.
Okay, you're a person, but what do you do? What do you do? Why are you
Too much.
important?
Well, actually, I don't think I am very important. Other people seem to think I'm important, but I don't think I'm very important. That sounded really condescending, but it is true. I actually do not think that I'm that important. What I tend to do is assist people where I can, but other people do that too. So, am I any more important than anyone else? I wouldn't think so. Um, but if you're asking me what credentials I have and what I do for an average daily workload, then that's a different question. Is that what you're asking?
Oh, yes, I am asking that. Basically, I want to start off with what's kind of on your CV. Recent, not, you don't have to go into super detail.
Well, as a general rule, my CV is extremely complex because I've done quite a lot in a very short lifespan so far. I started out originally many years ago in technology.
Crap, oh,
Started
crap.
working with our local telecommunications company in New Zealand, and then worked from there to actually develop my own telecommunications business. So I've had a lot of experience in both telecommunications, technology, and electrical engineering.
Now,
So that gives me sort of a bit of a background, or sort of a lot of knowledge in areas where technology and integration of technology with different telecommunications company and IT companies comes into effect.
okay. I wanted to ask, um, what was this telecommunications company called, and does it still exist? Are
Yeah.
you doing other things? How long have you been at this whole process?
Well, the telecommunications company that I originally started with, the IT company that I originally started with, still exists. It still operates in many parts of the world. It is still considered one of the leaders in certain telecommunications areas for technology. I won't get into details about it because it's complex in its own right. But it runs alongside of other technology companies that I'm working with now. But I've also gone on since that to extend that area of expertise into technology law, and sit on a number of committees that relate to technology. I need to turn this game audio down, it's driving me nuts. That work with, or sorry, that deal with issues in technology law around the world. That's the third time I've passed the turn off.
Okay. Could you
Fourth time I've
give an
passed it.
example of some company that you have worked with in the last
Yes.
2 years that might be recognizable to, say, the average audience?
Well, I'll finish highlighting it. Was I just needed to turn that audio off because it was distracting me. Sometimes that happens when you've got too much noise in your ears. Um, so with the technology stuff, what I do with the committees and stuff, we look into technology issues in law, how different people are engaging with technology in law, what potential problems that could create, and what potential difficulties that can exist when people engage with the law and technology in the wrong way, such as privacy, copyright infringement, security, maintaining customer security, that sort of area. And I sit on the New Zealand Law Society for that purpose. It's actually the Auckland District Law Society, not the New Zealand Law Society, but they are a recognised law society through New Zealand, alongside of the New Zealand Law Society, which is a regulatory body organised by the government. To achieve what I do with them, I undertook a law degree and then a master's. And I'm currently engaged in a PhD, which involves both law and business, which deals with issues of environment law. My master's dealt with issues of human rights, and also privacy and security. So, and we were looking at the gaming industry at that stage. So it's quite a wide and varied area of what I do, but the experience that I have in programming and technology helps to actually refine areas of the law which is inconsistent, and help to inform government on things that we need to be addressing as a society in order to maintain safety and security of the average individual.
Okay, so if I were to go to Auckland's Law Society website, I would see you listed as one of the staff
Yeah,
or
if you
consultation.
do a search for committees and have a look at the Law and Technology Committee, you'll see my pretty little face up there.
Okay.
Which won't mean much to the average user, because the average user doesn't know my real name. They only know me as Savi, because that's all you've introduced me as. So
true, because I'm not
problem for your podcast.
Well, it might be, but I also recognize that you would like to keep your anonymity for the amount of time for streams like this.
I don't really have any issue with anonymity. People know who I am. I've got a fairly strong web profile. If people look for Lgnch-Savi, they'll see me pop up in different forums.
All right,
so I'm not too concerned about anonymity. If there is something that I think is of a privileged nature, that it's not something that should be discussed in a general open forum, I will let you know.
Okay, well, then, what is your name, sir?
For what?
What is your actual name?
What's the question? Oh, what is my name? Oh, right. My name's Lord Gallagher, so I'm fairly well known out there in respect of what I do. So if they're having a look at the Law and Technology Committee, they'll see me down there under that.
Okay.
They'll also see names like Judge Harvey and other colleagues that I work with in the committee.
All right. So you mentioned you go through law and technology, but you do also have a secondary business called Adonis Technology. What exactly is that?
Well, it's not actually a secondary business. Gallagher & Co. Consultants is our law and technology firm. What we do is we deal with arbitration mediation, resolving disputes for people, as well as dealing with technology-related issues, both for law firms and non-law firms. Adonis Technology is the trade name that is under Gallagher & Co. Consultants. And that trade name was created in order to bring to the forefront the idea that we have within the business that technology can be both beautiful and complex, which is signified in our fractal logo. The purpose of that company is to assist in design systems for both the home user, but primarily for the business user, to develop secure protocols to protect them both at law, as well as maintaining customer privacy and privilege of what they're engaged with. You really shouldn't have tried to shoot me while you're trying to concentrate on that. That was a big mistake.
Damn it.
So so Adonis Technology deals with bringing some new technology to the forefront that is both secure and protects people's privacy and assists in protecting people to do what they want to do with technology while maintaining those levels of support for privacy and confidentiality and security, etc. And nothing in the world of technology is perfectly secure, but we do our very, very best and our damnedest to make sure that your security isn't compromised if our servers are going into business environments. That if you're dealing with law firms, that security is maintained from top to bottom, because they do have legal requirements under the legal practitioners guides in different jurisdictions, as well as Privacy Act requirements, especially with the new CERT requirements and EU requirements that have come out in the last 12 months.
Huh. Well, that's quite a lot to digest there. I originally had thought that Adonis technology had come before Gallagher and Co. Given the telecommunications company that you had previously. I didn't realize it was actually the other way around.
Yeah, no, it came after. Gallagher and Co. was first, and I developed, or Gallagher and Co. was born out of the fact that there was significant issues in the arbitration mediation. And when I was undertaking my law degree, I started to see more and more problems coming to the forefront that were not being resolved. So I implemented Gallagher and Co. to start addressing some of those issues and assisting people to resolve those issues. Adonis technology became born out of that because we needed something that dealt with the IT side of things that was separate to the arbitration and mediation, so that there could always be a protected level of arm's length process in order to make sure that no conflicts of interest arose in what we were doing.
You mentioned these two words, arbitration, mediation. What is it all about, and is that essentially what the main what your main business actually is on Gallagher and Co?
That's the main focus of our legal business.
Okay.
It's legal consultation. So I assist and lawyers and other parties in order to be able to make informed decisions as to case maintenance, as well as making sure that the research for the law has been done. But arbitration and mediation is a slightly different beast. Mediation in itself is on the same basis as arbitration, which is where parties want to resolve their disputes without the cost and protracted and requirements that are required when you go to court, but also to maintain a level of confidentiality and privacy around their case, because they don't want details of the case in the public arena, which when you go to court, everything must be in the public arena. So it gives a level of resolving the dispute down a process that is similar in some aspects with arbitration to a court process, but a little bit more flexible and maintains that level of privacy. In mediation, it's about the mediator sitting there and helping parties to resolve issues by coming to an agreement themselves, rather than being in a situation where the resolution is dictated, whereas arbitration is the same as a courtroom. You are literally giving a judgment based on the facts that are presented before you by the parties. In mediation, lawyers are usually not present. In arbitration, lawyers can be present, but parties can also handle it themselves. But when it's a complex area of law, an arbitrator, the same as a judge, will require someone with expertise to actually make the legal argument because of the complexity involved, so that when the judgment comes forward, the appropriate areas of law have been properly explored. That said, most arbitrators that I know, including myself, are very thorough because we know that our judgments are subject to appeal, and in the appeal process, a judge will be looking at both the reasons for our decision and how we came to that decision. So the law becomes under a quite high level of scrutiny and investigation to make sure the arbitrator has done their job properly. So most people think that arbitration is simply settling disputes out of court. That's not the case. Arbitration is a quasi-judicial system. It is basically going to a courtroom style hearing, but one that you've instigated rather than the court. It has privacy attached to it, and you're in a little bit more control of the timetable, so it usually is a bit faster and a bit cheaper.
Okay. So take, for example, the Samsung and Apple case a few years back. That was all out in the public arena. Would you say that
Correct.
At that time, arbitration essentially had failed them, or they didn't explore it full?
Arbitration.
Okay.
They went straight to the courtroom. It dealt with intellectual property. They considered that the issue of law was of significance, that only a judge could provide an appropriate determination, so they took it straight into the courtroom. There was no discussion there about them even addressing arbitration. And understandably, they were dealing with some very complex issues of both copyright and intellectual property. The law was not settled. There was confusion with the Intellectual Property Office of exactly how that would be dealt with. The court in itself, while there was a body of cases that gave instruction to the court, it was unclear because every case seemed to have a slightly different interpretation of the surrounding the circumstances of why people had come to the same sort of argument. So appropriately, they took the case before the court, and it dealt with some significant issues and some significant details of similarity as well as separation, where the parties had tried to create a level of independence with their product, but had really ended up creating something that was quite similar, and that had to be addressed in its own right.
Memento. Right. Self-killed here. Oh, there I go. So I wanted to ask, is arbitration, is it taking, is there a, what's the word, upward trend of arbitration, being used more often in, say, New Zealand, US, Canada, since,
It very much depends on the circumstances of the case. You know, arbitration is an option for people. It's not always adopted. It really depends on the circumstances. And I know that's a really lawyer thing to say. Oh, it all depends on the circumstances of the case. But it is very much true. Mediation is probably more widely adopted than arbitration because parties are trying to maintain a relationship. When the relationship's completely broken down and nobody cares about maintaining it, that's usually where you'll see arbitration and litigation come into its forefront. But mediation is always the first port that I sort of push clients to, or well, not push is the wrong word, encourage clients to adopt, primarily because we all make mistakes. Things happen in society. Nothing's going to be perfect always. So it's always better to try and resolve it yourself first, because the areas of mediation are fully confidential anyway. And if they fail, you can actually ask a mediator to put on an arbitration hat, as long as it is done at the outset and certain rules and protocols are followed in order for disclosure. And that can often be a quick and easy, simple solution. So you start off with mediation first. Parties are struggling, or they've resolved 80% of the issues that they had, but the last 20% would normally go to litigation. They ask the mediator to put on an arbitration hat, and he simply gives them a determination of the last two, which they're happy to abide by, and it resolves the problem. They can get on with their lives, they get back to doing business, and they become good customer relations again. So, as I said, it very much depends on the circumstances, but mediation, I think, and from what I've seen, is being adopted more readily. In fact, many of the courts, especially in New Zealand, are making mediation a go-to. It's the first place you should start before you bring it back to the court. In the family court, it's almost a requirement in most cases for them to try and work it out between themselves first.
So an example I have in the back of my head right now is it's typical. Say typical. It is. I think it might be typical American culture, but it's essentially the generic commercial of, have you been wronged in such a way? Are you could be qualified for this to sue so and so company. We see a lot of that kind of, I don't know, transactional or just like a blaming kind of narrative, at least in being pushed on a lot of the regular consumers. Is that changing?
I mean, it's really hard to say in America because you guys are used to running to the court for the littlest things. So would I say that mediation and arbitration is having a forefront in America? I would say that it is starting to find its footing, yes. what it's being used for at this stage is still quite minor related stuff, but your advertising is a completely different kettle of fish. The way that your lawyers currently advertise is to push for argument. Because let's face it, lawyers don't make money unless they go into litigation. All right, most lawyers are not arbitrators or mediators, and they don't want to do it. Some of them will go through negotiation, which they advertise as mediation, but negotiation is not the same thing. Mediation has very, very set rules in how you do things. There is actually a mediation agreement that you have to enter in order to engage with it. Negotiation between lawyers is simply the lawyer is in control of making an agreement that satisfies his client's requirement. Mediation, on the other hand, the mediator must be independent. The requirement of the mediator to stay independent is very important, because otherwise you don't know whether there's been bias in the decision or in the agreement that's been finally reached. So yeah, lawyers, really, it's not mediation with a lawyer, it's negotiation, and they're doing the best that they can for their clients, and that's why often negotiations between lawyers ends up in litigation. So when you're seeing adverts coming out from lawyers, it's because they're pushing that forefront. They're pushing the negotiation mechanism and then go to litigation, because that's where they make their money. Right? They don't make their money from mediations. So that's why your advertising is the way that it is. It's designed in order to inflame situations and in order to panic people into, well, yeah, I've been wronged. I can't resolve this myself, so I'll take it straight to litigation, where in fact there are actually other options out there. And most of the time, nobody wants to go before a judge, because nobody wants the precedent. Nobody wants to end up in a situation where other people can then turn around and say, look, you lost in this case, this is similar, you're going to lose again. So they'll usually enter into mediation easier. But in saying that, people usually, when they've been wronged, the emotions come in. And once the emotions come in, it gets much harder to resolve the matter yourself, because you're pissed off about it. And that's where the independence can come in. Lawyers don't feed on that independence, they feed on you being hostile and the other side being hostile, because, as I said, that's where the money is. And that's why you see the advertising the way that you do, and it's not really pushing arbitration and mediation, pushing litigation.
Are we going to see a change? Is it going to continue to stay as, like... I mean, it seems to be rooted in almost a salesman like mentality over just viewing the law and helping clients. It seems like the motivations are you know, based on money more so than based on money over winning cases, I guess.
I think that really depends on the law firm. I honestly, genuinely believe there are lawyers out there who genuinely are trying to do the best for their clients and are genuinely trying to resolve issues for their clients. But there are also the opposite side, where there are those who are simply looking at the dollar. Okay, I need my new yacht next week, and which clients can I milk in order to get it? You get that in everything. It's not just the legal industry. You get it in politics, you get it in standard retail sales, you get it in wholesale, you get it in importation taxes. Everything's got an element of that. So I don't think you can wheedle out and say, oh, well, you know, lawyers are the bad guys because they do it this way. Everyone does it that way. Lawyers just happen to be a little bit more obvious about doing it because they're dealing on people's pain. So an emotional content is an immediate factor that you factor into the advert that you're watching. But do I see it changing? No, probably not. I mean, it's worked for them for hundreds of years. Why would they change it? The only reason they would change it if it stops bringing them clients and stops making them money. That's the only reason you would see a change in it.
How can, I mean, you mentioned all of this. What can the average person do to find information on this stuff? I mean, yeah, you can go to Google, search up arbitration, and read till your eyes fall out. What would be a better way of helping yourself and avoiding litigation, if at all possible?
Well, I think probably, you know, at the risk of doing myself out of a job, probably the first thing you should really do, if you're entering into a dispute with someone, realize that you're in a dispute. You know, you feel that you've been done wrong. Okay, go and tell them you feel you've been done wrong and why. If they then respond to you as, we don't care, okay, then you're going to have to look at arbitration, mediation, or litigation. All right. But if they say, oh, yeah, okay, all right, we were probably a little bit wrong on that. How can we make it better? Then start looking at resolutions. When you have a company, and this relates only to companies, not individuals, but when you have a company who sits there and is very quick to say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll give you a $10 discount, they don't care about your business. Okay. Just giving a discount doesn't care about your business. What they should be doing, or what a business should be doing, is looking at the customer relationship. They should be looking at, okay, we've done you wrong. Yes, absolutely, we've overcharged you. You need a refund. And hey, here's an apology too.
I made it in the base.
If they've done you wrong in a different way, then they should be looking at how they've done you wrong and how they should be engaging with you to find what would make you happy. And on the flip side, a person who's going to be happy about a resolution shouldn't be indignant about it. They shouldn't say, okay, I now want to own your company because you shortchanged me by 30 cents. Be reasonable. If you're going to sit there and you're just going to be an arsehole about it, then expect to go to litigation. Now, everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes do happen. Overcharges do happen. Things don't get delivered on time. Be reasonable. Talk to the company. Understand where the mistakes happen. Try to resolve it. If you can't resolve it, then consider your other options. But you should at least engage with the company in a positive way, because they're just people trying to do their jobs, and sometimes they make mistakes.
Is there a website someone can go to? Yes.
No. Communication skills. I mean, you can look up arbitration and mediation, and like you can go to our website and we explain it to a certain degree. You can go to the Canadian dispute resolution body, which is ADR Canada or BCMI Canada, and they explain it in more detail about what mediation it is. But they're explaining their product and service. They're not explaining to you about disputes and how to engage with disputes. All right, because like everything, they're simply advertising a product. So think about what your question actually is. Ask yourself, am I looking how to resolve a dispute and need input or assistance on that? Or am I looking to engage with mediation and arbitration and I want to know about what that service offers? That's the first question you have to ask yourself before you can research it.
Well, the question I guess would be like the procedure for the average SMO on how to start this, but also to make sure they're doing it smartly, so they don't end up burning money left and right over something.
Okay, well, if you're in a dispute that requires arbitration or mediation, the first thing you need to do is know how to find an arbitrator or mediator. Okay. Now, the process is very simple once you have found someone to engage. The process is pretty much standardized worldwide because it is a litigious process, just a litigious process that you design yourself. But there are certain rules. When you're looking for an arbitrator or mediator, make sure that they're licensed. And what I mean by that is there's no regulatory license for an arbitrator or mediator at this stage. It's an unregulated industry, much like how law firms were years ago. So you need to find out which ones are members of appropriate institutes. Like, for instance, I'm a member of the Law Society in New Zealand. I'm a member of the ADR Canada, which is the international body, and BCMI Canada, which is the local body. I have connections with LIDAR and AMINS, even though I'm not a member of those because they only cover Australia and New Zealand, whereas we cover worldwide. And we're also a member of the Arbitration and Mediation Institute in the UK. So we've got pretty strong associations, and we work quite heavily with those associations to make sure, A, that we're conforming to the standards that we need to uphold and their code of ethics, but also help to develop a lot of those as well. If you're looking at an arbitrator or mediator and they've got no affiliations whatsoever, they're just a person who offers the service, then be a little bit cautious about whether their contract includes a proper code of ethics, and whether their contracts include a proper procedure, because there are proper procedures that we need to follow as arbitrators and mediators in order to make sure that clients are protected from inappropriate behavior and inappropriate decision making. And also it gives the client a recourse that if they have felt that there has been bias or there's been a mistake, that they have the ability to raise a complaint with a body who can then instruct them and advise them further on what steps they should be taking, whether it should be a complaint to the institute, or whether it should be a complaint that is one law, i.e. bias is a administrative law complaint which should be taken to the courts, whereas a complaint over inappropriate language, that's one for the Institute because it's a code of ethics issue. But administrative law one, which is Wednesbury unreasonableness, illegality, mistake of law, bias, those are all ones that should be taken up to the court to be addressed.
Okay.
So that's the first things that you can do. Inform yourself of the process that's available. Have a chat with arbitrators. I mean, we're very approachable people.
You don't have to, I don't know, pay money to go see them for their time.
No. Well, it very much depends on the business. I know for us, if you ring us and say, look, or just drop me an email and say, hey, look, how do I do this? I'll be more than forthcoming and saying, look, this is what you need to be looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no charge for that. But if you're in a situation where you say, look, okay, I've had a look into it, this is definitely what we want to do, we want to engage your services, okay, then you're starting to create a chargeable fee.
All right.
But we don't usually charge for information because we want the public to be informed on their choices. Others do. Others will charge you for every phone call they make. 6-minute blocks is sort of the standard. So you have to be aware of that. Choose wisely. If you make a phone call to the arbitrator or mediator you're looking at and saying, hey, look, we'd like to engage, we'd like to know more about the services you offer, and they say, well, there'll be a fee for that, then just phone somebody else. Okay, there's plenty out there that won't charge you to give you that information.
So basically, if someone's saying, yeah, we'll help you, but you need to pay us first before, or not help, but you need to pay us first before we can even engage in telling you how you should handle something in the most broadest of sense or general terms, I guess.
Yeah, that to me is inappropriate. Yeah, if you're being engaged in any way or you're having an inquiry made upon you about the service, you should be willing to provide details on your service. It's really important. Otherwise, you're not giving any confidence to your customer. So why would your customer want to deal with you?
Okay.
So, to my mind, yes, a person should be saying, yeah, look, we're a member of these bodies, and this is where you can find more information about the code of ethics that we're bound by and the rules and procedures that we follow. And here's our terms of engagement letter. If you choose to engage us, then you're fully informed. Come back to us, and we'll send you the contract. A terms of engagement letter is really important. I don't know how many lawyers I've spoken to under different rules, even in different jurisdictions, where the jurisdiction rules state the terms of engagement letter should be read and understood by the client before they engage you, right? And they send them after they've already been engaged by the client. It doesn't make sense to me because the whole purpose is that the client needs to be fully informed of what they need to be dealing with before they start engaging you to pay for your service. And I think it's a big mistake out there. But that's just my opinion because there's no stringent law that stops them from doing it the way that they're doing it. I just think that if you're in a position where you're asking for information about the service, you're not asking them to engage with the actual problem that you're facing. Any firm that is not forthcoming with that information, then I would be a little bit I would have questions around their tactics.
See.
But that's just me.
Well, I'm going to have to cut you off there for now. We'll take a little bit of a break. And we'll be right back with one last question, unless you rather address it in a separate recording.
Well, you've opened it now. Everyone's going to say, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Well,
you have to at least give them the question.
Well, here's the thing, audience. I got to start working right now, so I have to actually clock in before I could continue with this conversation. The next topic or next thing I wanted to bring up was reality checking, which sort of plays into arbitration and arguments.
Sure. Okay. Well, why don't you take a break for a minute, go clock in, and then we'll come back and address it, and hopefully you won't get interrupted with when you're getting the answer.
All right. Sounds good. It does not get too busy with these calls. We'll continue with this. Otherwise, We'll just have to continue it at a separate point.
That's fine.
All right, so getting back to the mind space, arbitration law, arbitration mediation are actually two different things. They're not synonyms. In these discussions, I believe, maybe I'm misunderstanding, you go through what is called reality checking. I've tried.
So you're talking about what happens during a mediation or an arbitration?
Yes. Either you use it not necessarily to win arguments, but essentially to challenge the other person to go down their own line of thinking using what we currently have in reality. At least that's the best way I can understand it for now. But if you could explain what exactly that means, that'd be great.
Okay, well, reality testing is a leadership technique. The idea of it, which has been incorporated into mediation and arbitration tools, is to make sure that any agreement, especially in mediation, any agreement that parties are starting to come to will actually work. I.e., if they've decided to settle out on the value of a property of a house, and they're not going to sell that house, and one party says, "Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'll just pay the other person what I owe them." Well, you need to do a reality check and say, "Okay, well, how will you do that? Where's the money going to come from? On what terms are you going to put it? Can you actually do it in the 7-day process that you've stated that you can pay it in?" And if they come back and, well, actually, I was going to rely on A, B, and C to happen, well, then in reality, the agreement's going to fail, because they're not going to be in a position in that 7 days, if something goes wrong, that it will actually occur. They're just having positive thinking. So when you're reality testing, you're actually going through and just checking that the statement that's being made to try and resolve an issue actually can happen, and that it's not just, "Oh, I think it can happen." And when we're doing it in arbitration, it happens less often. The reality testing is when we provide an order in arbitration, we generally reality test the parties to make sure that the order that we're providing can actually be done. And you do that throughout the hearing by testing different bits of evidence that they're putting forward and different statements that they're making. In mediation, as I said, it's slightly different because you're reality testing the parties because they're coming to their own agreement. In general terms, when people are engaging with problems, the situation that I usually address with them is for them to reality test themselves. Don't make a statement that you know you can't achieve, because otherwise any agreement you put on the table just isn't going to work. So that's what we mean by reality testing. It's a case of testing to check what you're going to say actually can be done, and it isn't just you saying it can be done.
Could it be confused with the logical fallacy argument using strawmen in some ways?
No, because the whole idea of a straw man is to put an argument forward that you know really can't exist. Straw man arguments are used primarily to put forward especially in court, to put forward how much of a fallacy the statement being argued actually is. So no, I wouldn't compare them, because reality testing is to actually test whether it is a straw man argument or whether it is actually a real argument. So it would be, if you were going to use it in a comparison, they don't compare to each other. One tests for the existence of the other. So a straw man can't test for the existence of reality testing, but reality testing can exist to test a straw man.
And besides law discussion books, which I've tried finding, but unfortunately you end up having to buy them or somehow get snippets off of Google Scholar, and that's it.
Well, that's pretty much it. Most of the stuff is academic writing, so
okay.
position is that that's how people make money. They make money off their academic writings, because there's a lot of work that goes into an academic writing. You know, years can be put into academic papers. So, you know, people get paid for doing that because that's how they make their source of income.
So would you
So
say
yeah,
there's
usually you'll have to pay for it.
so the question I'm getting to is, would you say there's no current, say, I don't know, published book at Barnes and Noble that's going to go into the area of reality testing for the average person to essentially make use of in their own life, so they run into less conflict with their friends and family?
No, because reality testing won't stop conflict. What people have to realize is that conflict is a normal part of existence in society. You cannot exist in the world without conflict, right? That's just how it is. You're even in your general discussions or in your general game playing, you're going to have conflict. All we have to do is take 5 minutes a look at how you play Grand Theft Auto, and people will realize there's going to be conflict. So the situation is that no, reality, there is going to be no book on how to avoid conflict, because you cannot avoid it. The sooner people get to the understanding that they can't avoid conflict, the sooner they'll actually develop tools on how to deal with conflict. So, in respect of trying to get hold of a book on reality testing, no, you won't find one, because there is no one tool of reality testing. Reality testing depends on the circumstances. For instance, reality testing in mediation is different to reality testing in arbitration, is different to reality testing in litigation, is different to reality testing in relationships, is different to reality testing in business environments where we use leadership. So the way to find out about reality testing is first figure out where you want to do the reality testing and what benefit it would be to you, and then look within that area of expertise for the reality testing tools. In business, it's called leadership. A lot of leadership techniques use reality testing to make sure that people are on the same page. Things like transformational leadership will have an element of reality testing within it. Micromanagement has an area of reality testing in it. In fact, it's largely reality testing, but a single manager is controlling it. In relationships, books that help you to improve your ability to date is a form of reality testing, because it will make you challenge yourself and question yourself as to whether you're using appropriate language, or whether you are actually can afford to go out on the date. Those are all forms of reality testing.
Okay,
So
so
to answer your question, to find a single book that gives you all the answers, it can't be done. You have to find the genre and then find the tools within that genre.
so really, reality testing is not necessarily just one. It's not as easy to say as essentially using theory within science, and I speak as a non-scientist, so obviously correct me. So as in, someone in science will come up with a hypothesis, says yes or no if that's true after they do all the testing. It's not quite as, it's not just a broad term you can apply to anything. It's more, it's got all these little subtexts to it, is kind of what you're saying, right?
Well, sort of. I mean, if you want to look at it, social science is a lot more difficult because people's behavior changes over time. But if you want to look at it from a pure scientific point of view, a scientist will develop a hypothesis. They will then go out and test it in order to make a theory. Well, the testing is the reality testing. They're testing whether it actually works in the environment of which they say it can work. So science in itself has its own form of reality testing. It's called trial and error. So yeah, I mean, it's in social sciences, it's more difficult to pin down exactly what reality testing is in respect of a blanket term. And as I said, that's because it's specific. Every element of our existence has a form of reality testing in it. We just have never labeled it. But reality testing in itself is simply checking yourself and testing what you're saying, or testing your hypothesis can actually occur. And you do that every time you go out. Like when you go out to the supermarket, you reality test whether you've got the money to actually buy food. So that in itself is a form of reality testing. It's a simplified form, but it's still a form.
So I almost wanted to say it was a form of bullshit detection, but that's not necessarily the case. It is closer to what you're actually capable of, as opposed to an optimist idea of what they want it to be, I guess.
Yeah, I
Maybe
suppose
maybe
if you were going to label it in that way, what you're really doing is taking a pragmatic look at the statement as to whether it is achievable. So it's using a pragmatic approach to test a hypothesis.
so when we so I mean, I wanted to get on this topic a little bit, or just to understand it a little bit better, because I feel like it does go hand in hand with I would say mediation, but I don't quite see it used a lot in general discussion. I don't even see it being applied by our own politicians. I don't even see it sometimes from scientists.
I'm not sure I would agree with that, because in all aspects of every conversation, there's a form of reality testing. For instance, I'm reality testing you right now because I'm pointing out to you that your hypothesis of the fact that you don't generally see it is actually flawed.
Okay.
You just haven't identified it, but it is there.
I guess I'm taking it more from the American perspective, because every time we watch any of our debates, it doesn't seem like they really go through that. I mean, there's programs out there where essentially you have debate competitions, and it looks like essentially where side A and side B present their facts, but they don't fully go through testing those facts. Do you see see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're trying to say there, but let's actually reality test that statement.
Okay.
When you have Party A who has made a statement in the political environment, does Party B not challenge them on that political statement, even if it's not thoroughly?
Yes. They
then
do.
That's a form of reality testing. They are bringing them to account. And whenever you bring someone to account, you are reality testing their statement. Even if it's not incomplete or it's not thorough enough, it is still a form of reality testing.
Okay. So essentially, they're more using a blunt reality testing than having it more fine-tuned. Say, for example, I want warp technology to exist because I know that space and time are bent, at least from my little understanding, based off of the mass of the planets, or not, the mass of the universe. It'll bend space and time around it. So that makes me think that warp technology is then possible.
See, and if somebody challenges you with it on that basis to actually get you to explain how you understand that the universe is bent, and whether it's based just on science, hypothesis, or whether there's actually theory to prove it, that's reality testing your statement.
Okay.
And then if you go to the next level and say, well, how do you connect that to warp engines rather than just simply space folding, that again is a reality test. It's testing the reality of the statement that you've made and whether the hypothesis is relevant. Now, I don't get annoyed at people when they start arguing against straw men, because straw men are the hypothesis. While there might not be a logical connection in their mind to how the argument's being framed, that doesn't mean that the argument's invalid, because logic doesn't always invalidate an argument. There might be a flaw in the logic, but the argument might still have sound grounding, i.e. A good one to explain that is Trump becoming president. Okay, the reality test and the logic of that argument is, logically he should never have become president, because there was no basis for him to actually have a sound knowledge of what he's going to execute, yet he became president. So the illogic of the situation doesn't make it an invalid argument, because the argument is he became president. So straw men can sometimes help us to reality test our reality test, i.e., by creating the illogical argument or the flaw in the discussion that's happening through the straw man. We can start to see flaws in the logical. We can start to see where issues might arise. So straw men are actually quite important in discussion. But what we have to recognize with straw men is when a straw man argument is created or a straw man argument is created, um, it's not really going to become reality. But the fact is we should still investigate whether that reality could come into eventuality. And we create straw man arguments all the time in technology. Have we secured our networks well enough? Back in the 1940s with ARPANET, etc., well, not 1940s, a little bit later than that, but with ARPANET and that sort of thing, they argued that they had.
1956.
Now, the straw men of that,
I think.
the reality turned out that they hadn't. So straw men can actually be quite good, and we're doing a lot of straw man testing at the moment. The straw man testing on the Intel processors has recently produced the flaw, the two major vulnerability flaws from Spectre and the other one. So without that straw man theory of, okay, is this possible? Well, logically, no, it shouldn't be possible because you'd have to, there are certain things that would have to be in place for it to happen. Well, if all those ducks lined up, we've proven that, yes, it is possible. Is it likely to happen? No, because having all of those ducks lined up in a row, even with the flaw in the architecture, is very, very remote. But what we've proven is it's not impossible. So therefore, the straw man exists in order to be able to say, if A, B, C, and D were all lined up, it could possibly happen. Should we protect against it? Logically, we would argue, yes, we should make every effort to create a protection.
Okay. As much as I don't like saying it, the current president for the U.S. is Trump. You mentioned how using reality testing, like, yep, it has happened. So it's not as if it's a lie that he's president. But would you say then, when someone puts forth, well, the Russians hacked the elections and influenced Facebook and Twitter, is that more of a distraction to, I can't believe this happened, with Trump being president, or is that
partially people's disbelief? Okay. Yeah, I do think there's partial disbelief there, but in saying that, you can't rule out that there wasn't some involvement. However, I don't believe that's why he became president. I think he became president simply because you guys had enough of the bullshit of the politicians, but didn't really reality test who you were putting into power. If you had have done the reality test on who you were going to put into power, I'm not sure he would have ever gotten there. But again, that's a straw man argument, and it's irrelevant now because he is in power.
Okay. Just gotta think about that for a little bit. I'm honestly at a loss for words.
No, it's just a conversation. What else do you want to know about? So far, you've asked me a lot of questions.
Let's see. I've asked you about reality checking. I've asked you about arbitration. Some of Adonis Tech. We've gone into a teensy bit of security and technology.
Yeah, well, that's a massive discussion.
Yes.
That one you
that we can save for another time. Whereas I also haven't gotten calls. I just changed it probably.
Just be happy.
So we can say, okay, so we can say Trump is the current president. The Russian interference was a factor, but the idea of Trump...
It may or may not have been a factor. I'm not going to commit to whether it was a factor or not.
Off, the lawyer says. What I'm saying is the idea of Trump, it had to happen in the U.S. at some point. If Hillary got elected, it would the next election would have been Trump or someone else. Is that what you're saying? Because of we're sick of bullshit. We're sick of the canned responses that don't actually give us an answer.
Yeah, I would say that's a good analogy of it. The frustration of people with politicians today, there was going to be an upset. Who that upset was going to be, we don't know. What I did know, and the straw man argument was when everyone said, oh, yeah, Hillary will be the next president. Not going to happen. Your society has made such a strong point of making it clear that a woman will never be president. There was no way there was going to be enough votes. And I was really surprised that she was even put forward on the ballot. So if you want to talk about straw man arguments, it's illogical to think that there would be a woman in power when everyone in the country has made it so clear that there will never be a woman in power.
All right,
and until
let's...
that attitude changes, it's a straw man argument.
Okay, so reality testing is something that is currently in existence, / here are your limited resources on how to accomplish said thing. That be a rough, broken down way of saying what it is?
No. I think that's too raw.
Damn it. Almost had it.
It's not, you can't, there's certain things you can't just boil down to its element. And reality testing is one of those. If you want to summarize reality testing, it would be the way that we test the logic of our argument.
See.
Right. And that's in a really, really simplistic form, because it's not that simplistic. I mean, it's not just how we test the logic of our argument, it's also how we test whether the reality of our situation will occur, which is partly logic, but is also partly the physical elements of what we exist in. It can also be done to test our conversational limits, our position of illogic. There's too many areas where it actually, we use it every day, but we just use it under different headers or different names. But at the end of the day, it comes back to reality testing. So it's one of those things that I wouldn't boil down to the simplisticness of its elements. It has a level of complexity to it, but it isn't an over complex thing. It's not something that you can just simply simplify.
Okay. Is there a set of vocabulary, that would help in using reality testing on your own? Like you mentioned earlier, yeah, I go grocery shopping, I test to see, yep, I have $30 in the bank, I can only spend $20, maybe at most, to avoid overage charges from something else.
Well, yeah, you're reality testing whether your budget can afford the item. That is reality testing. It's a form of reality testing. As I said, reality testing is simply to query yourself and make sure that what you want to achieve is within your means.
So if I wanted to query, if I wanted to talk to Trump himself and tell him, query him on, okay, you want to build this wall, great. What is the cost to it? How long is it going to take? Where will the money truly come from? Is that the questions I want to be asking, or are those more like pointed?
Reality testing his questions. Okay, that's reality testing his statement. And he gets called on his statements all the time. He gets reality tested by the media all of the time. And statements that he's made simply, honestly, don't make sense sometimes. So yes, if you were going to interview him and if you were going to reality test what he's saying, then that's exactly what you would do. You would come out and ask the question, okay, where is the money coming from? How are you actually going to achieve it? Now, that's what they did during the election. And he had better responses during the election than he's got now out of the election. And one of the questions that you've got to ask, why is that? Was it because his campaign manager was writing everything, or was it simply because he had a better grip on what he was dealing with and now he's under too much pressure and can't quite fathom it, or Is it now that he's had his butt kicked and he's being a little bit more cautious? We don't really know, but he did seem to have a better grip on it. The problem that I saw through the whole campaign is the randomness of the statements that he was making connected with the audience because they thought he was being really firm about issues, where in fact he actually wasn't. He was being so generic. It's just people didn't connect the dot. And we can blame partially the media for that because the media had a huge influence on what was being reported and what wasn't. And the minute he came out against the media, which people were getting to a position of distrust with the media anyway, he gained additional support because of that statement, even though nobody actually reality tested him on whether the media was wrong or not. People
So
just assumed the media was wrong because they were sick to death of the media having a go at him.
So essentially, CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News can be right or wrong. It doesn't matter as long as Trump says the thing and he points it out enough. They're just not going to believe him anymore. Which,
Well,
just
and that was the issue that you had, is that people had less faith in the media's ability to report the truth than they did in the statements that weren't reality tested from Trump.
or
And that's why he wasn't taken down a peg or two when he was making those flippant statements.
and we are also still showing that the media isn't exactly being the most truthful when it comes to Trump. When it comes,
And that sort of moves us on to the topic of the media, because that's exactly what the media have done to themselves. They have created, with the lack of investigative reporter, with the removal of the investigative reporter to the flippant reporter, and the quick news statement and the quick news element that later on is proven to be wrong, or they've had to do a minor retraction for, or a major retraction for, that nobody gets to see, has all undermined the credibility of the media. And once you start undermining the credibility of the media loses its power to be able to report the truth. And everything they say is going to be questioned.
at
And
least
that's exactly where they went. You know, the fake news of the internet, the propaganda that was put out there, the flippant statements that were being made that were unchecked. If you talk to people about Fox News, and one of the first thing that comes out of their mouth, most unreliable source of truth there is in the world. How did they get to that stage? They got to that stage because they simply did not investigate the statements they were making.
at least we can. I mean, we can say that with certainty with television news, and we can also even say that now, almost with online news outlets. I mean, it seems almost that investigative journalism is going by the wayside, and the people who are taking over to try and parse out the truth aren't journalists at all, but people who are just having different discussions through online media like YouTube. I mean, what's the future then? If they keep failing to do some form of reality testing in the broadcast media, as well as even the online print media, what's the future?
Well, let's not just throw away around the term reality testing. It's not just, it's reality testing would be done by the consumer of the information.
Okay.
The investigative reporter is what we need to bring back. I think it's a big mistake that our media positioning has removed that. I look at guys who work hard. They find their sources, they quote their sources, they keep a neutrality about the arguments they're making, and they bring it to the public's attention for discussion. And they have an opinion on it, but their opinion doesn't dominate their report. Those are the guys who actually need to be back in the spotlight. Those are your investigative reporters. Those are the guys who are bringing the questions to light that need investigation. That's what we need back in our media. That's what we need back in our reporters. They do themselves a disservice to just simply be making a statement in order to get ratings. Because that's not what media is supposed to be there for. Media is supposed to be there to assist. You just look at the weather nowadays. How many people trust what the weatherman says? Because they come out so often and say there's going to be, they use the word cyclone now as though it's a tornado. A cyclone's not a tornado. A cyclone is a bad weather pattern that doesn't necessarily have anything more than heavy rain in it. but they use it in terms where you think that there is such bad weather coming that you need to batten down the hatches. And they've been doing it for so often now, people aren't trusting it. So it's like the old story of the boy who cried wolf. The more they do this, and the more they do it in the media statements that they make towards anything, the less likely we are to believe them. And when the shit really hits the fan, then we're going to have big problems because people won't know what to do. They're going to get caught out, and we're going to lose life. And that's where I think our media outlets, and they're going to hate me for saying this, but I really think they actually need some regulation around them. That if a statement is made and that statement is later proven to be false because they didn't bother to investigate it properly, they should be prosecuted criminally.
That is pretty controversial because you.
Of course, it's controversial.
Because here in the States, you're going to run into it essentially someone making a freedom of speech or First Amendment argument.
And that's the whole issue. Freedom of speech is about having the freedom to make a statement, not a freedom to make a statement that is untrue. And that's where I think we've gone wrong. You know, society has gotten to the position now where we don't care whether there's truth in it or not, as long as we've put it out there because it sells papers or it brings people to give you 1 million clicks on YouTube. Well, that's really an appropriate way of actually broadcasting something that is going to be taken seriously by people. Now, we have a responsibility to actually tell the truth when we are out there in the media. And if we're not prepared to do that, then we don't deserve a First Amendment right. We don't deserve freedom of speech. We don't deserve the power to be able to actually give information out there. And that's why I make that statement. And yes, it's controversial. And yes, I'm probably going to get flamed for it. And that's all good. People have the right to have an opinion about my opinion. But I just think that we really need to take stock. And I make this clear. I do not have an opinion where I think reporters should be prosecuted and YouTube people should be prosecuted. I make the statement to highlight the fact that we really need to start waking up to the inappropriate way we use media and the harm that is causing. The old rules used to be that if you cannot back your statement up, if you cannot check your source and make sure that what they're saying is true, you don't say anything. And that seems to have gone by the wayside the minute we started getting into this, we have to get the news out now because somebody else might beat us to the punch. Well, if they beat you to the punch and they're proven wrong, then they take the consequences for that. If they beat you to the punch and they're proven right, it doesn't mean that you're going to lose ratings because people are fiercely loyal to where they get their information from. But you will lose that loyalty if you start becoming dishonest with what you're broadcasting.
So maybe we should be looking for maybe a compromise that regulation because it'd be really hard to nail that down into law.
At the end of the day,
basic opinion.
It would never be enforceable. But the fact is that what I'm trying to do is highlight to people we need a reality check. We need to wake up to what we are actually doing in society that is causing harm. And prosecution and criminally prosecuting people isn't the right approach to that. Okay, I make the statement because I'm trying to highlight and make it clear to people that the way we're doing it is just as inappropriate.
Would a solution to that be something like how, at least my understanding, the tech industry tends to, I don't want to say regulate itself, but maybe police itself a little bit? So, well, for example, like the...
News reporting is considered to have self-regulation on the fact that somebody else in the newspaper can say something opposite. The problem is what tends to happen in the actual reality of what's going on is somebody will make the statement, everyone will pick up and broadcast that same statement, and then when the retraction goes out, it gets ignored. So the self-regulation is not working in the media at all. And it's not working because we've done away with the investigative reporter. The investigative reporter would bring another paper to check for their statement. Now they're too busy trying to get pole position. And that's because most of the newspapers are owned by only a couple of people at the very, very top. So they're all doing it the same way because that's the orders coming down from top management. So maybe I should rephrase my statement. If the investigative reporter makes a statement that is untrue, the owner of the newspaper gets prosecuted. And again, I don't expect that to ever become law, and I'm not trying to remove the First Amendment right. What I'm trying to do is bring attention to the fact that if the orders are coming down from the top, an unlawful order is an unlawful order. Why are we following it? Whether it be a newspaper outlet or not, where's your integrity? Where's your ethics? Where's your belief that what you're doing is actually benefiting society? Because at the moment it's not. It's harming society. It's creating the very flippant statements that we see happening all the time. Now, Trump is a prime example of this, and I don't single him out as a president, I single him out as a person. Before he became president, he used to do the same thing. He will use flippant, rough-ass statements on Twitter that are then picked up and rebroadcast. If he's not checking his sources or his facts, shouldn't we be highlighting the fact that he's not checking his sources and facts and not rebroadcasting the stuff as the unbeknownst truth? Like reality show shit. Just because he said it? You know, we're not living in a reality TV show, but that is how this current presidency and that is how the current media are doing everything. This isn't a reality TV show. This actually affects real lives. How many times have the media said, oh, this person's guilty because he's been brought before the courts, or made a statement that a person's been brought before the courts before they're found guilty, and the people have torn the person apart and destroyed them, and then the person's been acquitted, and that's it. The stigma stuck with them for the rest of their lives.
So say,
how irresponsible have we been as people to have created that form of harm?
So, for example, that I forget which university it was, but the kid who was accused of rape.
Absolutely.
And his accuser is the girl who walks around on campus with a mattress, and she won't stop walking around with a mattress until he's, I think he was like expelled from the campus or privileged, prostitutized. The hell's that word?
You're telling the story.
Not accused of crime.
Convicted.
Convicted? Yeah, maybe it's convicted.
Prosecuted.
Prosecuted be better.
Yeah. See, until it's been investigated and it's actually been turned out whether it's true or not, because I've seen and I've read about rape cases and they have been absolutely fictitious. They have been made up because of a vindictive statement. And then when it comes to light that it was a vindictive statement, everyone turns around and goes, oh, that poor girl, look at how she's being attacked because of the statement that she made. You know, what if she had really been raped? Isn't that a bad enough thing? How much harm have you created? Now, I know this actually affects people who have been raped, and that's controversial in itself. And I'm not saying that the accusation shouldn't be made. What I'm saying is that it needs to be investigated properly, because unfortunately for every person that comes out and makes a false allegation and it's not investigated properly, it harms the people who have actually been raped and actually been hurt, and it weakens their case before the courts. And that's not an acceptable behavior that we're creating in society simply so we can get 5 minutes more time at home because we didn't bother to investigate it properly. Now, we really need to wake up as a society as a whole that if we're going to protect against harm, we shouldn't be creating harm by not doing our jobs properly.
So,
and making flippant statements and making statements in the media to bring attention to something that hasn't yet been investigated. All we do is undermine the ability for both the police and the courts to do their job. And the media has a big part to play in that.
Maybe less time posting shit on Facebook will help.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get flamed for some of these comments, and that's okay. You have the right to flame me all you like.
Oh, I know I'm going to get flamed. I mean, just that argument alone is going to piss off probably every feminist that I know.
Well, the thing is I have done feminist studies. I have an element of feminist to me, and I think it's absolutely atrocious that people who are raped are treated the way that they are. The problem is those who make fake reports undermine the very protection that we work so hard in the legal industry to protect.
It reminds me of a video that came out with I'm not sure. Do you know who Rose McGowan is?
Nope.
She was on the TV show Charmed. Does that ring any bells?
Nope.
Okay. Well, she's a former actress, and she's in a lot of ways really cool Spitfire because she will not take anyone's shit. So she was at this I want to say not a meeting, but just a little, you know, speaking, I guess is what you call it, like a presentation. I forget. I don't know. She was at a little speaking about abuse, rape, etc. And then someone piped up and said that she's not doing enough to protect trans women and trans rights and all this, like, just completely out of left field stuff. Is that something where we're seeing that inflamed from the media? Because, like, Rose was just basically trying to...
That's hard to say without knowing more about the statements that were made and the person who made the statements, what reason that they had to make them. I mean, it's very, you can't throw that sort of thing at the media because what you're doing is making a generalized statement about what could be without knowing what was in the mind of the person who said it. But in saying that, I would have suggested to Rose, I would have turned around and had her reality test that statement and say, okay, how do you think I could do more? And actually put the person to on the spot to actually give that information. How do you think she could do more? What do you think she's not doing sufficiently enough?
Okay, because her reaction at that point was, the person had, I believe, hit an emotional nerve. I
would think so.
Rose was essentially saying that, yes, I have helped women. I'm trying to do this and that. Please sit down so I can continue my talk. And then the person kept going on and interrupting her about it. But you're saying the mistake Rose made could have been that she said, okay.
No, I'm not saying she made a mistake. I'm saying the advice I would have given her to handle it.
Okay.
I'm not saying she made a mistake. She handled it in the best way that she could with the knowledge that she had. And you can't beat somebody up for that. We have a tendency to do so, but we shouldn't be doing that. Because we're all trying our best, and people work really hard. I work with victims. I work with people in the industry who have been physically abused, raped, mentally abused, have gone through hell in their lives, and I work with them to help them resolve that. And when somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, this person's accused this person of rape, and we don't think it's being done enough," even though there's been no investigation yet and we haven't proved it to be correct or not, this person should be prosecuted, it pisses me off. And it really does, because at the end of the day, those sort of statements undermines all of the protection we're trying to get in place for those who have had and actually have evidence of that abuse. Because the false report means that the next time that a jury is put in front of one of these people who actually do this harm, they'll have doubt in their mind. And when you have doubt in your mind, you cannot succeed in a criminal prosecution, because the requirement is beyond reasonable doubt. And if there is any amount of doubt that the defense has put forward an argument that brings to the possibility that she could be telling a lie, because of the statements that have been made by these other people who have been lying, it undermines their ability to gain protection. So I say to all of those people out there who make up rape stories, who lie about the rape, stop doing it, pull your head in, because you're harming those who really need the help. So and that's about as firm as I can put it. And I'm not trying to be nasty to anyone, but I'm trying to point out that, you know, having a go at people who are working so hard in the industry, it only takes one person to make a false report to undermine years of work to get protections in place. And this is what the feminists don't seem to understand. It's not that we're anti-feminist. It's that we're working so hard to get these protections in place, and these people who make the false reports undermines years and years of work.
Undermines years and years of work, or just, well, I mean, that kind of goes into sort of, I mean, it's it's off of reality testing, but it goes into the conversation about labeling. And we've had this conversation off this now inaugural podcast previously. I think possibly last year or the year before, around this time. I think it was during the elections, actually. Now I think about it, essentially how you had told me that I really should not be giving so much of a shit what I call myself and what I call others, because we're all just individuals. What I'm seeing now, though, is if you make the wrong move, you're labeled this, and your career or your ability to make an argument, or not an argument, but to have a discussion, just gets completely thrown out the window. And you're not even able to actually perform reality testing. So what is the solution to that? Is it just you now have to ignore that person and take them for that's what they're going to say, and it's just not best to get in an argument with them? Or because you start running into the idea of, well, people are pushing back, and some people are moving way further to the right and way further to the left, and calling themselves things because they don't want to be X, X, and X.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think you've got a multitude of problems within that statement you just made. So I'm going to try and address each one by breaking them down into each of their components. The first one is labeling. We tend to label ourselves because we're trying to find out who we are, and we're trying to identify with a group of people. Hey, I've got no problem with that. But when labeling goes to the point where it takes on a persona of its own, labeling's gone too far. We label things in order to be able to try and make sense of things. So there's no problems with labels in itself. Where the problems with labels occurs is when we start to give it strength or give it power in its own right.
I will have to pause you on that one. I have a call. One moment.
I can carry on. You don't have to be there.
Oh, all right. Sounds good.
So I think that's where a big issue in labeling is. We don't really need to be in a situation where we have to label each other. You know, gay, straight, transgender, whatever. That's the group that you're identifying with. And good on you. So you should. You should stand up for who you are and be 100% who you want to be. You should be yourself.
Or that person just hung up on you.
Okay. My issue with labeling is that people then take that to the extension that it has to be in this box that they've put it in, even though they haven't told people what that box is. And that's where we get to these misunderstandings. You know, I'm a gay man in society. At the end of the day, people say, oh, well, you can't be called a boy because men don't go around calling other men boys. Bullshit. I get called a boy all the time. And I'm not a boy age. So I don't care what people call me. And I've said this before. You shouldn't care what people call you because you should be comfortable with yourself. You want to call me gay, you want to call me straight, you want to call me a dick, you want to call me an asshole. I don't care. You call me whatever you want to call me. Because I'm comfortable in myself that it doesn't concern me. Do I call other people names? Absolutely. Always in jest. It's never serious. But absolutely I do. Because it's part of how we deal with each other in society. If we're comfortable in ourselves, nobody can call you anything that you're going to be upset with. Because it really doesn't matter. You know who you are. And I think really what labeling is highlighting in today's society is that we have a whole pile of people out there who don't know who they are. They're struggling. They're trying to find themselves. And they're not being given any assistance to do so. You, for example, you drive me nuts with some of your illogical arguments. And I tell you repeatedly, but it doesn't make any difference to how I see you. Are you still not my friend? Absolutely you are. But I'm going to call you out on it when you're being bloody stupid, as I expect people to call me out on it when I'm being stupid. But we need to respect each other as people. We need to respect the fact that we exist, that we have differences, and we have a right to live on the earth just the same as anyone else. This is what we argue in human rights. Okay? What we need to stop doing is holding people to standards, right? People are going to make mistakes. It's part of our existence. We can give them shit. If we're having a bad day, we can take it out on them. But don't make it personal. Keep it around the issue that they're facing. Okay, you just made a really stupid comment. Okay, I'm going to call you on that comment and call you a bloody idiot for making it. All right? But I'm not going to call you an asshole because you're still my friend and I respect you. I respect everybody out there as equals. We are all just the same people trying to learn and trying to make our way in society. We should not be attacking each other all the time, trying to make out that we're something better than we're not, because we're not. We've all got to learn. Some of us have learned more than others only because of the path that our journey has taken us on. But let's keep an open mind, talk academically in order to investigate problems. Let's not make it personal. We can be passionate about a subject, absolutely. But know who you are, be who you are, and respect other people for who they are. They might be bloody idiots. Good on them. You can respect them for being a human being and still being a bloody idiot. So that's my 2 cents. I think we make far too many things personal, and we attack people personally instead of realizing, hey, they have a differing opinion to us,
Such as,
or they may have more additional knowledge than us on a particular subject.
so I guess such as when I'm occasionally labeled as a transphobic individual.
But see, I don't understand why people consider other people to be transphobic. Are you afraid of that person existing?
No.
Do you think that person should be put to death?
No.
Then you're not transphobic. Would you have sex with that person?
It depends.
Well, no,
But it's
if you
also up to
wouldn't,
me.
that's fine. Because that's a personal choice. Okay, I'm gay. I choose not to have sex with women. Does that make me a sexist against women? No, absolutely it doesn't. Because that's got nothing to do with my take on who women are. It's got it's the take that it has is on who I am. I choose not to have sex with women because I'm not attracted to women in that way. That doesn't mean that I don't love women as people, or consider that they have the same rights as everybody else and they shouldn't be segregated. What I have a problem with is when somebody labels me as being a sexist simply because I'm not attracted to a woman. Same thing for you. If you're not attracted to somebody who's transgender, then you're not attracted to them. It's got nothing to do with how you see them as a person, and it doesn't make you phobic.
Even if I would prefer that they would tell me ahead of time. Not because
No,
of...
that's your right to know. If somebody has been in prison, would you not expect them to tell you that they've been in prison if you're going to get into a long-term relationship with them?
I would
Isn't
kind
that
of
the
want to know,
idea of
yes.
a relationship, not to have secrets?
I would hope so.
Exactly. That's how you build trust. But that doesn't make you transphobic just simply because you want them to tell you ahead of time and that you're not attracted to a person like that. Because you might sit there and go, well, actually it doesn't make any difference to me at this particular point in time because I'm really attracted to this person. I love this person for who they are. That's bisexuals are like that. They'll sit there and they can love both because they don't have any position of sexual orientation. They just like people. What's wrong with that?
Nothing.
So I think us labeling people as transphobic simply because we want to make an informed choice is absolute nonsense. An informed choice is an informed choice, and isn't that the very thing we argue for with our statements of freedom of speech, human rights, and all that? We're asking for equality, and then we will ban people for trying to be equal. It is your right to have forefront knowledge. It is your right to be informed of a position. If a government said to you, we're not going to tell you when we're going to take a military action in your neighborhood, even though the law says that we must, would you not have a go at the government?
I might be a little
It's
bit
probably
upset.
a little bit too wide for people to understand that, so let me try and simplify it a little bit more. Would it not be inappropriate for you not to be informed of your right to better taxation? Taxation without representation is not taxation, it's dictation. So if you want to be informed about your right to dictation, wouldn't you want to be informed about the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with?
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to be in a position of trust with that person?
Yes.
Because any lie, no matter how small, creates a level of distrust. And just because somebody has changed from a man to a woman, or a woman to a man, or is transgender, you should still be honest with your partner. Because without that honesty, it will break down the fabric of your relationship,
The
no matter
argument
how long you've been in that relationship for.
the argument I hear thrown back at me, when I say that, is, well, unfortunately, we've had a lot of. This is without all the vitriol that was thrown at me, but basically they were saying a lot of trans people have been killed because the guy in the relationship overreacted and murdered them. But I felt like that's a whole separate issue
You're not
altogether.
wrong. It is a separate issue. A person committing a murder is not the same as being phobic. Okay, you have people who have been in gay relationships where murders have been committed because of fear. Fear is what creates murder, not your being phobic to something. Okay, if you don't get told something, you're more likely to freak out at the moment and attack a person than if you're told ahead of time before you get so engrossed that your heart can't handle it. The fact that people are going to commit a murder, as criminology will inform, they have to have a predisposition to committing murder. You don't sit there and play a computer game, and you don't sit there and be transphobic and then suddenly jump up and commit a murder. You have to have the mindset to be able to commit a murder before you commit one. There are a lot of people who have found out that they were in a relationship with a transgendered type person, and they've simply gone, oh, look, I can't handle it, and left the relationship. They haven't committed the murder. And there are a lot of people who have found out that they're in a transgender relationship, and they've stayed with it. The fact is that everyone deals with their sexual attraction and their emotions differently. What we've got to do is, if we remove the dishonesty, we remove the risk of harm. So if you want to remove the ability, or you want to remove the fact that somebody's going to freak out and kill somebody, be honest with them from day one, and then you won't have that risk. And isn't honesty the best policy? I mean, that's what we teach in society. That's what we teach in religion. Honesty solves problems. So why are we now trying to hide away from dishonesty? Sorry, why are we trying to hide away from honesty and create dishonesty simply because we want to label everyone as transphobic? It's a nonsensical argument that I would classify as a straw man argument. There's no logic to it. You cannot create protection with dishonesty. Doesn't work. Our criminal courts are full of people who are dishonest. That's the whole reason they're there. Anyway, I get quite passionate about that subject because gays have been persecuted for a long time, and they're still persecuted in certain countries today, including America. It is a passionate subject for me because I have seen so much harm. I've read so many cases of harm, same as rape and woman abuse and male abuse. I see that all the time too. I see the degradation that people put themselves under because of a low self-worth, and it's nonsense. And we've got to stop labeling it, and we've got to stop being assholes towards each other and start respecting each other for who we are. We're all going to make mistakes. Focus on the issue, not on the person. Let's actually treat people with a modicum of respect, even when they're complete dumbasses on a particular issue. Now, I will take criticism on my comments that I've made, and I will be quite happy to take from anyone that I am completely wrong, provided they can show me they've never made a mistake in their life. Because I can't claim it. Oh, we can only assume that he's been called away to a call but didn't tell us because I was in the middle of a rant, so that's okay. I hope that this cast that we're doing at the moment gets across the point that we really need to Stop berating people for having opinions. Opinions are perfectly fine. Reality test opinions, check opinions, make sure that, when call somebody out when they're being inappropriate, but don't berate them as a person. They're allowed to have an opinion. Help inform them, help teach them where their mistakes are, but don't try and kill them because they've made one. That's really what I'm trying to get across. Respect each other for who we are, treat each other as human beings, treat each other with equality, but respect the fact that we are going to have differing opinions and we are going to have different attractions and we are going to see things differently to how we need to deal with it. If we can't respect that in each other, then who are we and how do we deserve to be treated with the respect that we're asking for as a transgender, as a gay, as a feminist, as a heterosexual, as a whatever? Regardless of what we label ourselves, if we cannot respect each other for being people, we will never get into a situation where we can actually respect each other for having an opinion. And society cannot grow without differing opinions. We will become stagnated as a society if we don't continue to challenge the lies that we're told, the misinformation that we're told, and actually bring the truth to light. So don't berate someone for having a different opinion and for requesting honesty.
All right, I return. Sorry, I could not, unfortunately, say that I was leaving because I had to go take a call. Is anyone still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. Sorry. I think that wraps it up for now. I think we've explored enough topics to possibly save for another time, I would say. Thank you,
Well,
Mr.
let's see what the audience comes back with, and we can always address some of those. One thing I would say, feel free to comment and have your opinion, because I do value your opinion. What I would say though is that don't expect me to respond to anything that is just nasty, because there's no need for that.
As in
The
calling you a
idea is to
turf.
try and create informed positions here and a little bit more knowledge. So if you're just going to make a rant that has no basis and can't be reality tested, don't expect a response. If you've got a genuine position, if you really think that you've been hard done by, and something in this comment has brought something to your attention that has given you an emotional response, and you're feeling really upset about it, feel free to contact the appropriate people, such as suicide helplines or anything like that, because that's really important. You can also comment back to us. We'll try and do our best to assist you if we can. But you have to remember that society is not the best. Society has its ups and downs, it has its flaws. The key is for us to make sure that we make it a place where we can all live together. Even if it's not in perfect harmony, that at least has some harmony within it. So I would say that as a closing statement. But at the end of the day, feel free to make your comments. If we think that they are valid comments, we will bring them up in a future show that I'm involved with. I'm quite happy to do that. But as I said, I'm not going to respond to just hate. There's no point in that, because it's just going to feed egos if we start doing that sort of thing. The community here is designed to assist people and help them find better understanding and more academic knowledge about what people actually do in law. We work hard to protect society. So I'm happy to keep assisting with that knowledge and bringing that to the forefront and helping you guys to work through, especially emotional harm or situations that you've had criminally or whatever, to help make sense of it. I want to see everyone successful and not be in harm's way, but that requires a level of tolerance from everybody. So build a community on that factor. That's what I ask. And let's leave the hate for something else.
I could not have said it better myself. Savi, it's been a pleasure. For next time, I believe, since we explored a little bit, I would like to get into Kim.com if you have the time.
Yeah, happy to explore that a little bit more. Although in saying that, there is a high level of information around that, so it might be one that has to be broken down into separate issues. But we can have a look at that. Perfectly happy to discuss that further.
All right. And then another topic of discussion would be another one for maybe a separate episode besides Kim.com. I want to go into something that is called Game A and Game B theory, and that has been coined by one Brett Weinstein, who was ousted by Evergreen Campus. So we look more into that, and also see what the hell this Jordan Peterson guy is all about, because he seems to be a rising star, it seems, internationally. And if what he's saying is all bullshit, or if, maybe there's something to it. Do you have any other further comments, Savvy, before we go?
The only last thing I would say is this is a podcast, so listen to all of it before you make your opinions, and don't take things out of context, because I will call you on it if you do that. All right. Context is very important, and the context of this podcast has been very clear, and I've clarified things when needed, so don't just pull out one sentence that I've said